When we need to subtract any two numbers from each other, such as in that example, there is a technique known as vertical subtraction that we can use. For instance, we can say 7 minus 5 is 2, and then again 6 minus 4 is 2, to give us the answer of 22. However, we have to keep in mind that we are working with the decimal number system, meaning we have the units and the tens column. Also then the thousands column would be added, and the decimal side of it, the tenths and the hundredths and the thousands and so forth. But for this purpose, let's just concentrate now on the units and the 10. Looking at the next example, we can see that we cannot subtract the 5 from the 4. That will give us a negative number. So we are taught to borrow 1 from the 6 and put it there, and then that becomes 14. But the why of this whole process is what I would like to explain, because that will make sense then if ever you have to do this again and you have to figure out what to do. Remember that 6 is in the tens column. So it doesn't really stand for 6. It stands there as a representative of 60, because it is in the tens column. Meaning, when we take a 1 away from there, we are actually taking 10 away from the 6. So that, although that 6 will become 5, we have borrowed 10. And that 10 will be added to the 4 to give us 14. And then say 10 minus 4, 10 plus 4 is 14, minus 5 is 9. And then when we subtract the 5 and the 4 to get 1, we are actually saying 50 minus 40 will give us 10. Because remember, that answer is not 19, it's 19. Meaning it is 10 plus 9, because the 1 is standing in the decimal, in the place value, or in the column value of the tens. Keep that in mind when we are looking at the last example. 6004 minus 45. We cannot subtract the 5 from the 4, which means we have to borrow 1 from the tens column. But there is nothing to borrow. So we borrow 1 from the hundreds column. There is nothing to borrow. So we have to borrow all the way to the left at the thousands column, which means that 6, which stands for 6,000, would now become 5, standing for 5,000. But remember, we have borrowed a total of 1,000. So, which means there we would have 1,000 available in that column. But again, there is not a number there. We have to borrow from there again a total of 100, which will then go all the way to the tens column. So now we will have 100 available there to do the subtraction. But again, we have to use it all the way to the right. So from the 100, we borrow a total of 10, which will be added to the 4 to be said 14 minus 5 is 9. But since we have borrowed from that 100 10, it means there's only 90 left, which will make that 0 into a 9, and then we minus 4 is 5. But we also borrowed from that 1,000 that we brought across there, a total of 100, which means now we only have 900 left in the hundreds column, but there is nothing to subtract, so that will just become 9, and then the thousands, 5 minus 0 is 5. So our final answer would be 5,959, although you have to remember that if you write the 6004 correctly, 6004, when we borrow, we would say there would be a 9, there would be a 9, and that would become 14. That's how we are taught to do it. But just in case you were wondering where it comes from, the 9, and the 1, that's where it comes from. Because we are borrowing from a column value in the decimal number system on the left each side.